The Death of Spider. Daniel Quirk, aka Spider, was a professional wrestler who worked from 2002 to 2005. Quirk never got to work for any of the major promotions during his short time as a wrestler. However, he did work for some smaller promotions such as NWA New England and Chikara. While I haven't seen a whole lot of Spider's career, he seemingly had a promising start to his journey as he was prominently featured in Chikara's Young Lions Cup tournament. However, sadly, on May 28, 2005, Daniel Quirk's wrestling career and his life came to an end. During a match for the promotion Ultimate Championship Wrestling, Spider would attempt to go for a moonsault outside of the ring. However, he would land directly on his head. Blood immediately began pouring out of Daniel Quirk's head and the match was stopped. Quirk had died instantly. Spider's death is often referred to as the first in-ring death for independent promotions. It should also be noted that when Daniel Quirk landed on his head, there was no padding outside of the ring. He landed head first, directly onto concrete. Industry veterans such as Al Snow and Paul Bearer heavily criticized the independent wrestling scene for not protecting their wrestlers enough and not using padding outside of the ring. Thankfully, after this incident, independent promotions started to get the memo and actually began putting pads outside of the ring like they should have been doing in the first place. Spider's unfortunate death was a result of a promotion's recklessness and inability to protect their performers. After Quirk's death, his parents simply said, "At least he died doing what he loved." The Life and Times of Jim Nidheart. Jim the Anvil Nidheart was a mainstay in the WWF from the 80s to the early 90s. He's probably best known for his time in the Hart Foundation during the 80s alongside his family member Bret the Hitman Hart. Eventually, in the early 90s, the Hart Foundation would split up, and Nidheart would begin teaming with Bret's brother Owen as a part of the New Foundation. The New Foundation would have very little success, and by 1992, Jim Nidheart was fired from the WWF after refusing to take a drug test. Nidheart would then have a brief stint in Eastern Championship Wrestling before making his way to WCW. The most notable part of Neidhart's run in WCW was teaming with the Junkyard Dog. Not too long into his WCW run, however, he would leave the company. Nidheart would return to the WWF in 1994 and would basically work as a corner man for Bret until eventually betraying Bret, revealing that he was only helping him so that Owen could take the WWF Championship from him. By 1995, Nidheart was back to teaming with Owen in tag team action. However, before WrestleMania 11 would happen, Nidheart would be fired for no-showing events. Nidheart would bounce around various promotions throughout the rest of 1995 before returning to the WWF once again in 1996, this time under a mask being called Who. The Who character simply existed so that the commentators could do the Who's On First bit by Abbott and Costello. Eventually, Nidheart would go back to playing himself as he joined the newest version of the Hart Foundation, featuring him, Bret Hart, Owen Hart, the British Bulldog, and Brian Pillman. This new version of the Hart Foundation was super over during the Attitude Era build-up, and they would have many feuds with DX, the Nation of Domination, and even Stone Cold Steve Austin. After Survivor Series 1997, Jim Nidheart, along with the British Bulldog and Bret Hart, went to WCW after the Montreal Screwjob. Bret was already planning to go to WCW in the first place. However, after the Screwjob, Nidheart and Bulldog left out of protest. Nidheart and Bulldog would go to WCW and would team together for most of their tenure there. After hanging around in the mid-card with British Bulldog for the most of 1998, Nidheart was released in October of that year. This was pretty much the end of Nidheart working in bigger promotions. He would make sporadic appearances in big promotions, such as when he showed up on TNA and wrestled Jay Lethal in 2009, or when he showed up in the Raw 15th Anniversary Battle Royal in 2007. Neidhart wasn't just a wrestler, though. He was a human being who struggles just like other people do. On September 6, 2010, Neidhart was arrested on several drug charges, including 2 counts of possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute. He was also charged with trafficking illegal drugs as well as 1 count of burglary. He was also charged with third-degree grand theft. During the arrest, Neidhart was allegedly very aggressive after swallowing a couple of pills outside of a gas station. In 2012, Neidhart was sentenced to 5 months and 29 days in jail. Thankfully, though, Jim Nidheart did know that he had a problem, and he did his best to get better. Nidheart would complete 2 stints in rehab that were paid for by the WWE. Jim Neidhart's last match would be a 6-man tag team match for the promotion BCW in 2016. On August 13, 2018, Jim the Anvil Neidhart would pass away after falling and hitting his head while going to change the thermostat in his home. Neidhart was 63 years old when he died. Thankfully, Jim the Anvil Neidhart's legacy continues to live on through his daughter Natalya, who has been with the WWE for nearly 20 years. In 2019, Jim the Anvil Neidhart was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame alongside Bret Hart as the Hart Foundation. Neidhart was also very proud to have played in the NFL for both the Dallas Cowboys and the Oakland Raiders. Neidhart's unforgettable look with his crazy goatee and his big body will always be remembered by WWF fans of the 80s. Neidhart was one of the best tag team wrestlers in history, and his spirit will live on forever. The plane crash that almost killed Ric Flair. On October 4th, 1975, Ric Flair, Bob Bruggers, Mr. Wrestling, Johnny Valentine, David Crockett, and a pilot were all involved in a plane accident. The crash occurred due to the plane running out of fuel as they were flying in North Carolina. Ric Flair and Johnny Valentine were both injured very badly by the crash, and unfortunately the pilot was killed in the accident. Ric Flair ended up with a broken back in the aftermath of the crash, leading to him having to completely change his wrestling style. Johnny Valentine was also unfortunately injured, leading to him never wrestling again. Everyone else was okay for the most part, but the injuries sustained in this crash would forever haunt Valentine and Flair. Johnny Valentine would eventually become a manager, however, eventually he stepped away from the wrestling business, and in 2001, he passed away. Ric Flair would continue wrestling full-time until 2008 when he retired, after which he would return in 2009, before again returning in 2022 for one last match. To this day, this story will forever be remembered as the plane crash that nearly killed Ric Flair. The murder of the Gimenez twins. Alejandro and Alberto Gimenez were 2 mini wrestlers who were best known for playing Espectrito II and La Parquita, respectively. La Parquita was essentially a mini wrestler who dressed and wrestled similarly to famous WCW star La Parka. Meanwhile, Espectrito II is a mini wrestler who is the second in the lineage of Espectrito. The original Espectrito is actually a mini wrestler version of another luchador by the name of Espectro. The 2 brothers both found mild success in Mexico as they both got to work for AAA, which is now owned by WWE. However, both Alejandro and Alberto's time as wrestlers and their time on Earth would come to an end in 2009. On June 29, 2009, Alejandro and Alberto had checked into a hotel room for the night after finishing a show on Sunday night. After checking in, the twins were approached by 2 prostitutes wanting them to come back to their hotel room. The twins obliged and went to their hotel room with them. After following the prostitutes to the hotel room, both men were given alcoholic beverages spiked with eye drops, which is a tactic often used to drug and rob people. Unfortunately, due to Alberto and Alejandro's very small stature, this dose was too much for them, and it killed both of them. The police managed to track down the women who had killed the Gimenez twins by tracking one of the brothers' cell phones, which had been used by one of the prostitutes after their deaths. Both women would be found guilty on July 12, 2010, and were sentenced to 47 years in prison each. A robbery gone wrong took two of the most talented mini wrestlers in the entire world from us at the same time. Thankfully, both women are still behind bars to this day, and hopefully they stay there, unable to hurt anybody else, thinking about the horrible actions they committed. The end of Bobby Duncan Jr. Bobby Duncan Jr. is a second-generation wrestler and the son of Bobby Duncan. Duncan Jr.'s career began in 1992 before ultimately ending in January of 2000. After a failed stint of playing for the Arena Football League's Dallas Texans, Bobby Duncan Jr. began wrestling for the Global Wrestling Federation in 1992. Duncan Jr. would form a tag team with another wrestler by the name of Johnny Hawk, known as the Texas Mustangs. However, after a short stint as the tag team champions, Duncan Jr. would leave wrestling for 2 years. After 2 years, Duncan Jr. returned to pro wrestling in January of 1995 after making his debut for All Japan Pro Wrestling. While working for All Japan Pro Wrestling, Bobby Duncan Jr. would also make sporadic appearances in a Dallas-based promotion called the Continental Wrestling Alliance. In 1997, Bobby Duncan Jr. would make his debut for ECW in a match where he defeated Balls Mahoney. During this time, Bobby Duncan Jr. would be making appearances for both ECW and All Japan Pro Wrestling. In July of 1998, Bobby Duncan Jr. wrestled his last match for ECW in a loss to Mikey Whipwreck. In September of the same year, he, along with Stan Hansen, would end up losing to Yoshihiro Takayama and Gary Albright in a tag match, which would be Bobby Duncan Jr.'s last appearance for All Japan Pro Wrestling. In November of 1998, Bobby Duncan Jr. made his WCW television debut in a match on Nitro against Mike Enos. He would later win a WCW TV title match against Chris Jericho, however he did not become the champion due to winning by countout. At WCW's World War III event that year, Bobby Duncan Jr. made his pay-per-view debut in a rematch against Chris Jericho, however he would lose this match. In early 1999, Bobby Duncan Jr. would join a faction known as the West Texas Rednecks alongside Curt Hennig, Kendall Windham, and Barry Windham. The gimmick of the West Texas Rednecks was that they were a group of country singers. Virgil, aka Curly Bill, would later join the faction. The West Texas Rednecks even released a song called Rap is Crap that got airplay in some parts of the United States. They had another song titled Good Old Boys, however this song was not as popular. The West Texas Rednecks are also very well known for their feud against rapper Master P and his No Limit Soldiers faction in WCW. During the summer of 1999, the West Texas Rednecks would also feud with the Revolution as well as the Filthy Animals. At Road Wild 1999, the West Texas Rednecks made their final pay-per-view appearance in a loss to Perry Saturn, Dean Malenko, and Shane Douglas of the Revolution. Well, actually, it wasn't their last pay-per-view appearance, as the West Texas Rednecks would go to All Japan Pro Wrestling after Barry and Kendall Windham were released in 2000. Bobby Duncan Jr. made his final televised appearance on WCW Thunder, where he and Barry and Kendall Windham lost to the Filthy Animals. Bobby Duncan Jr. seems to be a star on the rise in WCW. However, in January of 2000, tragedy would strike. On January 24, 2000, Bobby Duncan Jr. died of a drug overdose in his home in Texas. His autopsy revealed that he was killed by a lethal dose of fentanyl mixed with painkillers. On the episode of Nitro that came after Bobby's death, he was given a 10-bell salute. It seemed like Bobby Duncan Jr. had the potential to become a huge star in the future. However, due to an unfortunate tragedy, we will never truly know what the career of Bobby Duncan Jr. could have possibly become. The self-destruction of Shaun OHare. Shaun OHare's wrestling journey began when he was trained at the WCW power plant in Atlanta. Eventually, he would begin appearing on WCW television on the B shows like WCW Worldwide and WCW Saturday Night. Eventually, OHare would have his first match on Nitro, where he and Mark Jindrak would defeat Rey Mysterio and Juventud Guerrera in a tag match. Their next match would be a loss to the Misfits in Action in a number one contenders tag match. However, later on, they would fight in a three-way tag match against Chronic and Vampiro and the Great Muta for the tag team titles. In August 2000, OHare and Jindrak would join a stable known as the Natural Born Thrillers. This stable featured OHare and Jindrak, Reno, Chuck Palumbo, Shaun Stasiak, Johnny the Bull Stamboli, and Mike Sanders as well. Eventually they would be mentored by Kevin Nash, however this would not last very long. Later in September, Mark Jindrak and Shaun OHare would finally win the WCW World Tag Team Championships for the first time. OHare and Jindrak would win the tag team titles one more time together before splitting up in a very odd Russo booking decision. During a tag team battle royal, Mark Jindrak and Shaun OHare, as well as their Natural Born Thriller partners Shaun Stasiak and Chuck Palumbo, were the final four participants in a tag team battle royal. At the end, though, in an odd series of events, Mike Sanders, who was apparently the commissioner at the time, declared that both teams were the winners and that they should trade partners. So after this match, Shaun OHare would now be teaming with Chuck Palumbo, and Shaun Stasiak would now be teaming with Mark Jindrak. After this, an angle would start where the Natural Born Thrillers would split up due to Jindrak and Stasiak being jealous of Palumbo and OHare. At Super Brawl Revenge in February 2001, Jindrak and Stasiak would lose to Chuck Palumbo and Shaun OHare in a tag team title match. At WCW Greed in March, Palumbo and OHare would defeat the team of Totally Buff, which was Buff Bagwell and Lex Luger, to retain their tag team titles. This would turn out to be the final WCW pay-per-view. On the final episode of WCW Nitro, Chuck Palumbo and Shaun OHare would retain the World Tag Team titles in a match against Mike Awesome and Lance Storm. Chuck Palumbo and Shaun OHare's contracts would both be picked up by the WWF after the WCW buyout. On June 28, 2001, Chuck Palumbo and Shaun OHare made their WWF debut on SmackDown when they attacked the Hardy Boys, officially aligning themselves with the Alliance. After this attack, Palumbo and OHare would begin a feud with the APA, who were the WWF Tag Team Champions at the time. In their first WWF pay-per-view appearance, OHare and Palumbo were defeated by the APA at the Invasion event. Not too long after this, Palumbo and OHare lost the WCW World Tag Team Championships to Kane and The Undertaker. Palumbo and OHare would get a rematch with the Brothers of Destruction in a steel cage match, however they lost. The last time Palumbo and OHare would team with each other would be on the August 26th episode of Sunday Night Heat, where they defeated the Holly Cousins. After this, Shaun OHare was sent to WWE's developmental territory, Ohio Valley Wrestling. After training in OVW, OHare would return in June of 2002 on an episode of Heat where he defeated Just Incredible. Throughout the rest of 2002, OHare mostly wrestled in dark matches. However, in December of 2002, he did a segment where he dressed as a mall Santa and told kids that Santa wasn't real. Wow, really great stuff. In January 2003, Shaun OHare started the gimmick that he is most known for, the Devil's Advocate gimmick. OHare would do these vignettes where he would tell people to do bad things like drinking while you're an alcoholic or cheating on your wife. All of these vignettes would end with the phrase, "I'm not telling you anything you don't already know." During this time, OHare would also get a new look, having some new spider tattoos on his wrist, as well as longer hair and a big black trench coat. Later that year, OHare would start being mentored by Rowdy Roddy Piper. After joining Piper, that would be the end of his devil's advocate persona. However, under Piper's tutelage, he had victories over guys like Rikishi, Funaki, Chris Benoit, and Mr. America, aka Hulk Hogan. On June 26, 2003, Roddy Piper was released from his WWE contract, leaving Shaun OHare on his own. After Piper was released, OHare would mainly wrestle on Velocity before an unfortunate injury took him out of action. In late 2003, Shaun OHare was involved in a motorcycle accident. Due to this injury, he would be sent back to OVW to get back into ring shape. His last few matches were in 2004 against John Cena at house shows. However, in April 2004, Shaun OHare was released by WWE. In June of 2004, Shaun OHare was arrested after allegedly striking 2 women at a Hilton Head club. However, this was not the first time OHare was arrested, as he had been previously arrested in 1992. Later in 2004, Shaun OHare would sign with a Japanese kickboxing promotion known as K1. And apparently, Shaun OHare is pretty damn good at kickboxing, as his record was 10 wins, 1 loss. After this, OHare would begin working in MMA. OHare's most notable MMA fight would probably be the one from October 21st, 2006, where he would replace Mark Hunt in a battle against Butterbean. However, OHare would be defeated by Butterbean. According to his official fight record, OHare only lost 2 of his MMA fights. In 2007, Shaun OHare would once again be arrested after getting into a bar fight. However, all of the charges were dismissed. In September 2009, Shaun OHare was arrested once again for battery and trespassing charges after assaulting his girlfriend. OHare would be arrested one last time in 2011, once again for battery charges. Shaun OHare had gotten married in May of 2005 and had a son with his wife at the time, Joy Hare. However, they would eventually get divorced. According to fellow WCW wrestler Scotty Riggs, Shaun OHare had a deep battle with depression and substance abuse. OHare had gone through 6 stints in WWE's rehab program and had completed each and every one of them. Unfortunately, OHare's battle with depression would come to an end in 2014. On the morning of September 9th, 2014, Shaun OHare's father found him dead in his bedroom. OHare had hung himself from one of the bedposts in his room. Shaun OHare seemingly had all of the tools for success in the wrestling business. He had the look, he had the moves, but one thing that he lacked was the charisma, and depending on who you are in the business, that can be a career killer. Clearly, OHare was a troubled person who constantly got into trouble with the law and had to battle with substance abuse. OHare was only 43 when he died, and he could have had a very long life ahead of him. Shaun OHare is a perfect example of why you have to try and take care of your mental health, and never be afraid to reach out when you need help. Hey guys, thank you all for watching Dark and Disturbing Pro Wrestling Stories Part 5. I apologize for taking so long to make this. I had meant to get it done earlier in July, and I had parts of it done in July, and by parts I mean the first entry about Spider, but I got sidetracked with a lot of things. I was busy doing a lot of stuff with friends, and I buckled down this week, and I got the rest of it done, so yay, it's finished. Part 6 will come out probably within the next 2 to 3 weeks. I'm probably going to take a week off just so I don't get burnout, because doing this 3 days in a row is kind of reminding me like, editing this shit can be a drag. But thank you guys so much for watching. I'm thinking about possibly changing the name of this series, because I feel like some of the entries on this one may not have been very dark or disturbing, to be fair. Some of them definitely are, especially the Gimenez twins and Shaun OHare's unfortunate passing. But let me know what you guys think about that in the comments if you would like. And I appreciate you guys so much for watching. And I really hope you guys enjoy this video. So thank you all, and I will see you next time.